I had the opportunity to meet you. Gosh, it's been almost 3 years ago.
Almost 3 years, yeah.
Almost 3 years ago. And Ann Nicholson, well, I knew her as Ann Simmons, and then she got married.
Yeah.
She looks for these amazing powerhouses. And when they're hungry, she looks for the right opportunity and she sends them to Bold.
Yeah. And
and and that's how I got to meet you. And I remember talking to you and you were just hungry. You're like, I just need to be fed.
yeah,
And what we know about Bold, for people who haven't been through, we actually get to see the heart, the core of the person. So on the outside, what I knew of Anika before Bold is that you are powerful, you are passionate, you are just this badass that has so much courage and creativity, and you make things happen. And then you go through the class and I'm like, you are powerful, you are like, you're
yeah,
so authentic to who we see on the outside, and you're hungry for change.
yeah.
And so first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me here. I was really excited when I got the call to come and share. So thank you.
Oh my gosh. Well, and you've been on my list, and I was just waiting for the right opportunity. So just a quick, for those of you who do not know her, so I'm going to just read your little bio. Well, a
Okay.
big bio. So you are not right now the VP Brand Marketing and Digital for Foxwoods Resorts Casino. It is the largest resort casino in North America. You're also a board member for Global Gaming Women, and that's how I met you
Yeah.
with Ann, because she was part of that.
Yeah.
You're a photographer, a writer, a creator, and I love how you put lost musician. She's pretty much a big deal, people, because she was named the most influential women in iGaming by IGB magazine. She received the Bronze Stevie Award winner for the 2020 Marketing Executive of the Year last year in the midst of a pandemic. You were named one of the top, or the 25 people to watch in 2018 by Global Gaming Business Magazine, and you won the 2018 Women Achievement Award from the Nevada Women's Fund. I mean, Anika, when I look at your journey and people want to know, how did you get here? Because we don't just step in and go, oh, look at me. There's so many steps along the way. So how did you what was your journey like? Tell us a little bit about you.
So, I mean, I know when we first started talking, you kind of made the distinction of who you are versus what you do. And so I always like that because there's very much a distinction of who someone is professionally and who they are just kind of personally at the core. And so I've always identified as being an empath. And to me, that just simply means that I feel and I understand experiences and the feelings of others outside of my perspective. And I feel that very deeply. And so as a daughter, a sister, an auntie, a friend, a creative, I really feel like I carry a lot of that kind of with me. One of the things that I share is that I am the oldest of eight. So it was always very lively and there was never a dull moment. But I also feel like because, we all grew up so close, there was this sense of the need to share and be empathetic. And so not just sharing things, but like sharing space and experiences and all of those types of things. And as the oldest, I've always had this sense of obligation, the sense of obligation to kind of set the example, to be the example, and to also feel like I needed to make my own way because I I didn't want my parents to have to worry about me and the rest of my brothers and sisters. I wanted them to know that I was okay. And so I think a lot of that kind of really shaped me as I grew up and as I tried to find my way on my own.
So no pressure, you know, nothing on your back. That I mean, just having to make that way, improving. That's what I remember even 3 years ago.
Yeah,
There is this sense of I need to do this. You're the driver. It's the pit bull of going after what you
yeah,
want and refusing to back down.
yeah.
Um, there's such a huge responsibility within being the oldest of eight
Yeah.
people. So of course there's no space. So talk to us a little bit about just your influence. So you were born and raised in New Orleans, right? And
So, and
then,
I'll Yeah, and I'll tell the story. So I was born in New Orleans. My parents were actually student activists during the civil rights movement. And I don't even know if I kind of shared this story with you, but I was born in New Orleans, but during that time, they were relocated from Louisiana to Washington, D.C. There was protests at their schools. They were kind of student leaders, and a student was murdered. And they actually, um, you know, started to relocate a lot of the student leaders. And so my parents, along with a number of other students in the South, were relocated to a location where they felt like they could be safe. So imagine like my parents, young college students starting and raising a family in a new city, kind of without that support structure, kind of coming from an environment that was very um, that they were trying to improve. And so I think when they got to DC and when they started kind of having and building this family, really for them it was important for us to be fearless. They wanted to make sure that we're exposed to everything, to music, to arts, to science, to technology, and to kind of give us that feeling that that one, we would have opportunities that they were not privy to growing up, but also experiences that would help us to I think really think globally and beyond just kind of who we are individually, but a sense of social responsibility, responsibility for the community, responsibility for just kind of being a better person overall. And so that has always kind of sat with me. When I look at kind of all of us as we look at what we've done, I think that's the one thing that has centered us all in some way. We do have this strong sense of community and sense of, you know, helping and righting any injustices. And I think we get that fire from our parents.
So they absolutely gave you your voice.
Yeah, they really did.
That is, I never knew that story. And
Yeah,
now that
I like
makes
we could
sense.
do a whole section just on that experience. And one of the things that I've started to do now even is just wanting to dig more into their story, into, my family's story. And I think, now kind of knowing that history, knowing kind of all of that has been coming even much more important to me, and to, share that with kind of our family overall.
So you had a quote on your bio when you sent it in, and I love it. It says, "Every child is an artist. The
Yeah.
problem is how to remain an artist once he grows up."
Yes, yes. And I think what happens is that when, and that's kind of when I said kind of lost musician, because I I look at my brothers, who I have one brother who is just an amazing artist. He is a teacher. He's kind of embraced music from kind of day one, and he's always kind of been that's been the center core of who he is. And I almost felt like I needed to make the choice. I was like, I can't be a struggling artist. I have to do this. I have to do all these different things. And you kind of sometimes get this feeling that you have to make a choice between kind of going into professional realm or being a creative person. And I think all of my uh, kind of hangups and all that stopped when I realized I could definitely do both. When kind of very early on in my career, working with designers and engineers and programmers, you find that there's this symbiotic relationship between art and technology and creating and innovation. And many programmers or engineers are artists. You'll see them, either they're a DJ or they're a musician or they're kind of writer, or all of these people, have all these creative outlets. I remember kind of growing up, one of the more interesting experiences that I have is that there was a special program at NASA, and they took a group, and I think I must have been in elementary school, and they were like, okay, we're going to bring you together from all across the country, and you're going to plan a mission to Mars. And so, like, we weren't astronauts, we knew nothing about it, but it was the whole idea of wanting to kind of be unfeathered by kind of convention, to say what would if you put these kids in a room, what would they come up with. And so that was a program that we taught, and I feel like it's that same type of creative ingenuity that feeds a lot of the innovation we see today. And so it's important to still have that creative outlet and energy at the core. So I've always kind of felt like, when you're feeding that, you're it's something that you're able to do that also helps you to be better just overall.
Well, when you feed it, it's like it stokes the flame, right? And it just
Yeah,
starts to burn brighter and brighter and
yeah,
brighter.
yeah.
So how did you get into gaming? Like what was the correlation between this creative technology and gaming?
It was accident. So I was in graduate school. I had a really good friend who was very much into gaming, and I did the research, and I went to I kind of we, there was a meet and greet at the university where they were coming to recruit, and I think I wound up talking to the right person. I talked to the person that was the decision maker, not knowing it, but and just asking the same thing when she was like, well, why are you interested in gaming? And I was like, well, I don't know if I am interested in gaming, but here's what I want to do. And I kind of talked about the idea of feeling that technology was the great equalizer, and that there was so much opportunity to do all these different things, and this is my vision for what I could do. And I'm here to really understand if there was a place for that within the casino industry, because that was my really first introduction to gaming. And it turned out that there was, during that time, they were in the process of really looking at interactive differently. And I went on to do an internship there. They had a program that's called the President's Associate Program, where they put you in touch and kind of with a rotation. And it actually full circle sent me back to New Orleans, where I helped open that casino there that's at the base of Canal Street as part of my rotation. And really, I got to reconnect with my family there. But the real piece of it was getting an understanding of how technology and how some of that could drive what was happening in gaming. And I immediately just fell in love with, just the energy of the people, the opportunity to really make a difference. And, I saw immediately all the things that they could do. And it's crazy because now, kind of the realization of COVID, unfortunately, a lot of those things that I was even thinking of way back then are now we're being realized, as part of, here are some of the things that you can do when it's just necessity kind of dictates that you do things differently, and you embrace technology to get some of that stuff done. So
Isn't it amazing how adversity, Eric and
yeah,
I, because we're in the leadership realm and we
yeah,
watch people,
yeah,
and I remember early on, we're like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to watch people go through adversity. Just you want to protect, but at
yeah,
the same time, stepping back, going, holy cow, when we have adversity and there's challenges,
yeah,
it actually helps us uncover things that we never thought were possible. And now we look forward and we actually embrace it.
yeah,
And it's like we have these ideas and these dreams, and sometimes it takes the adversity to actually go, okay, it's time to launch it. But you
absolutely.
can't give up on it.
Mhm.
So talk about just so your topic, the power of creative leadership.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So for me, I feel like it's kind of twofold. It's kind of being able to look at things beyond just the black and white. It's the ability to kind of also to connect with your team and to give them permission to think outside of the box, give them permission to play, essentially, give them permission to say, um, without boundaries, what are some of the things that you can accomplish? And really, I think some of the things kind of just going back and thinking about kind of the sessions that we had in Bold is really just kind of getting people outside of their comfort zone, getting people outside of their kind of own skin, and giving them the tools and resources to think differently and to be okay with thinking differently. Because I think what happens is a lot of times you're stuck in kind of these traditional conventions, and you're not necessarily able to or feel like you uh, can be different. And so I think it's about thinking globally and strategically and looking at things a little bit more holistically. And now, especially in this day and age, it's not just about kind of what is the right solution, but is it kind of is it taking into account kind of your being socially aware? Is it taking into account kind of how that impacts others and impacts the environment. And so really, really being open enough to creatively look at all these different ideas and look at all these through all these different lenses, and give the team and empower the people that you work with and work for, and work for you to do those things.
So how do you do that? How do you get people to get creative, to think outside the box?
So there are a couple of things that we've done. So I know at one point I always will do kind of icebreakers, and uh, one of the things that like for example for Foxwoods, I'll use Foxwoods as an example. We had lots of we had competitors coming into the market, all these different things going out, and so I sent our team on a field trip, and I kind of broke, mixed everybody up into different teams and kind of said, okay, here's your mission. Your mission is to, have fun, go to a competitor as a guest, go to a competitor kind of not with your marketing lens on, but with kind of like, is this a place that I want to go? And then let's kind of come back and compare notes. And so part of it are kind of doing different things like that, where you're giving people the opportunity to do things that are outside of their kind of core comfort zone. And kind of for me, a lot of our team members they're not guest facing. So they're the designers, they're the programmers, they're working on lots of different things on the signage, but it's very much important for you to put yourself in the perspective of the guest. So a lot of it is doing things like that. And then also we did a lot of kind of customer research and insights, and kind of sharing that out, and sharing out not just what the insights are, but also what kind of what our vision and what we're trying to accomplish, so that everyone has a clear understanding of what the goals are. And for me, it's really about sharing and giving information, and creating a two-way dialogue that helps do a lot of those specific things.
So there's all these studies that talk about the power of play. The
Yeah,
power of play,
yeah,
it taps into that creative side of our brain, which allows us to think different thoughts.
yeah,
And so, for leaders, for individuals to think
yeah,
outside the box, when we get stuck,
yeah,
you know, there's people that we know who have like pool tables in their meeting, their
yeah,
meeting rooms at work. They'll play games, they'll get out there, shoot hoops, they'll do spike ball,
yeah,
whatever.
absolutely. I think that's a big, big piece of it. I mean, for me too, like a lot of it is kind of one-on-one, and tapping into and understanding that everyone is different. So tapping into the passion for each person, and kind of talking to them, and sharing and figuring out what is that thing that unlocks it. So like I have a designer that's a photographer. And so, and one of the things we wanted to do is make sure that we could grow his experience in that area. And so giving them opportunities to step outside of their comfort zone and into other things to help them develop as artists and as people as well. I think another piece of it is just also helping people find their voice, because in many cases, I think, and I think early on, me included, you need a little bit of push outside of your comfort zone to do that. But you're right. For us, I don't, if it's music, if it's, just kind of getting out and walking, kind of whatever it is, kind of having that permission to say, there's nothing that's confining you from doing some of those things. And in the time of COVID, one of the things that we've been able to do is just have a very flexible work life balance, in terms of whether you're working here at the property, or kind of working from home, but giving people that flexibility, so that they have the balance that they need.
So what would you say to someone, because we have people from every
Yeah,
different
yeah,
role, we
yeah,
have owners of companies, people who lead
yeah.
teams, individuals. What if they are like, I am not creative, I just don't play? What could you tell them?
And I feel like, when you think of creativity, I think you initially think of it being artistic, but I mean, you could be a creative problem solver. You could be, you could have, it's really just a state of mind. It's really just
Mhm.
uh, opening yourself up to being able to think differently, or to find kind of that thing that drives you. And so, It may not be music, it may be reading, it may be, like you said, like I said, it may be kind of problem solving. It might be, even as an accountant, kind of being able to understand kind of how, kind of to look at something in a unique way. Um, it's, so I think it really just comes down to kind of finding that thing that really energizes you and what that is, and kind of realizing that it doesn't, that everyone is innately creative. It's not something that you have or don't have. It's just an innate part of you. It just, and in some cases it's dormant, and you have to figure out how to tap into those elements that are going to bring that out.
It's interesting when you said everyone has it. I remember years ago, I took an assessment,
Yeah.
and I love personality
Yeah.
assessments, but this
Good.
assessment told me I was not creative. And I remember looking at that going, I don't know how to create. And it was literally a block. I am the people person. I
Yeah.
know how to create some details, but I had in my mind for years and years and years that I didn't know how to create.
Yeah.
And starting Driven, I realized that I actually have this
Absolutely.
creative, but it's what you were just saying. It's how do you tap into? It's whatever sets your soul on fire, and then paying attention. It could be walking outside, it could
Yeah.
be sometimes exercise,
Yeah.
music, but all of a sudden when you're in that place,
Nice. Yeah.
it taps on and it's like, oh, I have an idea. I have another idea. Your creativity might be, it builds on top of another idea. Some people can just create poof out of thin
Yeah.
air,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. It's almost like, as it Simon said, it, like finding your why, and kind of that passion, and what, like you said, what ignites you. And so it really is kind of doing that work, and saying kind of what are the things that that will fulfill me. And when you find that, I think that's kind of when people realize that, that maybe you're not a painter, and you're not painting, kind of you're not painting the Mona Lisa, but like whatever those things are that are going to kind of, like you said, get you excited about what you're doing and passionate about it. That's kind of when that creativity comes out. And I think that's when you can bring that out in others as well, because your passion and your desire and your interest is something that becomes infectious. It's something that you want to share, and other people feel that as well.
do you think people can create when they're in a fearful state?
No, I think fear is the blocker. And I think that's kind of what's happened to me. And it's interesting when I was having, it's like when you're in a fearful state, it's you're not in a place, because your mind is telling you all these things and everything that you can't do. And so um I'm not the right person to say, okay, how do you get out of that fearful place? Because that takes, it takes a number of different things to be able to do that. But I do feel like kind of that fear is the number one blocker. And what happens is that on that fear of the unknown, once you get past that, you realize that the place that you were in was kind of much, much darker than than anything else. And that you there was no need to fear what was coming next. It's just like you had to get past that hurdle in order to get there. And I've been there too. I've been there in places where you kind of feel fearful or disillusioned, or kind of not in um are not kind of in a place where you feel like you can move forward. And so for me, uh, it's your mind is a powerful thing, and it can kind of convince you that you can, as easily as it can convince you that you can't.
So share with us a time in your life where you were just going after it, ideas were just popping left and right, and something happened where it was just like all of a sudden the writer's block of creativity. And then
So
what did you do?
I mean, I think there are two things. So part of it was, and I'll start kind of back a little bit. Um, Yeah, I'll share. And I think you know this story. So probably now it was 2016. 2016, I'm traveling for work, super excited about it, kind of getting ready to speak at our kind of big leadership meeting. Um, Kind of something I've done a million times in London, kind of doing very kind of, I'm feeling a little bit run down, but not necessarily knowing kind of what was going on. So it turns out, I'm thinking jet lag, etc. What's happening? I have a friend that tells me, something's not right. You need to get checked out. Turns out, um, go to the hospital, immediately get admitted in London. Uh, blood transfusion, stays in the hospital for kind of a week and some change. And at the end of that, kind of on leave for work. So I get back after all of this has happened, and I'm not myself. I come back to work, and everything feels foreign. Everything feels foreign. I don't feel connected. I don't feel creative. I don't feel like I belong there anymore. And so just all of these different kind of emotions are trying to come up in terms of what I want to do. And kind of like you said, your brain kind of is playing all of those tricks on you uh, that tell you you can't. And so what I needed to do is exactly that. I had to take a mental retreat. I started writing, and this is like this is before Bold, and I started journaling. I went back and kind of went into my photography, and it was interesting because that kind of reignited me and started making me feel more like myself. I found kind of the thing that would feed my energy, my spirit. And once I kind of got that back aligned, I felt like more adjusted and more um in a good place for work. And it wasn't anything that anyone else could do for me. It wasn't anything that I could like have the conversations. It's not something that I felt like I could talk to my peers about, because it kind of felt like I was just in this funk. And for me, it was that creative release that helped me get through that and kind of back into a place where I was like, okay, I'm ready. I can move forward. But then also after that, it kind of helped me think and to just to say, okay, what are the things that are important to me? What are the things that I want to do? What are the things that matter to me? And am I in the right place? And I think those are all types of things that are important that you have to ask yourself too.
But you have to be willing to ask yourself.
Yeah.
First, you have
Yeah.
to
Because
be
there are hard
aware.
questions to ask. Yeah.
Yeah. When I asked you earlier about the fear, can you be creative when you're in a fearful place? You said no.
Yeah.
And, we look at studies all the time, and the studies show that when you are in a fearful place or when you're even angry, everything within your brain is focused on the problem and it
Problem.
cannot see solutions.
Yeah.
And it's how do you, when you see that, and as a leader, and especially now, sure, you're into this,
Yeah.
there's some hope,
Yeah.
but there's still like these ups and downs, and it's like, when are we going to stop
Yeah.
pivoting and shifting?
Yeah.
But you have to figure out, and I love what you said, is to step back and go, wait, what can I do? What makes me come alive?
Yeah.
And I think if people could actually just pause wherever they're at right now and just give themselves a grade on a scale of 1 to 10, how creative are you right now? And then look at, so what can I do to play? How can I be a child to tap into that so I can get a different idea?
Yeah.
Because that fire just wants to burn.
It does. And I think part of it, uh, like for me, and it's interesting, say like journaling is a big piece of it, having a routine that of things that you want to do. One of the things I've started doing, and sometimes it's is having just that journal by my nightstand. So if I have an idea at night, it doesn't really matter. I can put it there and kind of make note of it and come back to it. And some days it makes sense. Some days it's like translating hieroglyphics, and I'm like, what was I thinking? But in general, kind of getting in that routine of doing that and being able to kind of go back and assessing it and doing that on a daily basis definitely is something that I think is a habit that once you do, it really helps ground you and focus you and help with honing that creativity.
Do you ever just go to a playground?
I did actually. Oh my goodness, maybe 2 weeks ago, I kind of went on a long drive with a friend, and we went to a playground and I got on the swings. And
I just
it was great. It was like overlooking the river and just got on the swings and like a kid. So yeah,
it's a never too late to be a kid
it
again.
never is.
Like,
Uh,
I love that. I get on sometimes when I see a playground or out there with the grandkids, I'll sit on a swing if it fits, you
yeah.
know? And it's
Oh,
just there's
hopefully
something
it's
about
cold.
make right,
Yeah.
it just makes you come alive.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I think that's the other thing. Spending time with my nieces and nephews, it is because you can see, like you see that, as a kid, you are fearless. You have all this wonder, you have all this energy, you have all this excitement, and then somewhere along the way, as adults, we were told that we need to suppress that for some reason, and you don't.
Did your parents ever make you suppress it, or were they the ones that always encouraged you?
No, I mean, I think my parents pretty much always encouraged me. That was one of the great things.
Mm.
Like when we were learning to play instruments, my I was learning to play saxophone. My brother was learning to play trumpet. Another brother was learning to play trombone all at the same time. So God bless my parents. But like they always were very much about us kind of pushing ourselves in that way. So that was never anything that I felt suppressed with my family. I think when I think some of it was myself. You go and you have these things and you say it out loud, but you don't want to. I think maybe it was a little bit of imposter syndrome, a combination of just me being who me and trying to figure out my way of fitting in and realizing later in life that you don't really need to. Like you can be your own person, you can be unique, and you don't necessarily have to do that. But I think those are lessons that just are growing pains as you evolve as a person.
Did you always feel like you had to prove yourself?
Yes, always, always. And I don't, like I said, some of it I felt like that was just inner drive that I need to um to to prove myself. But then I think when you're just in an environment and you're different and you just want to make sure that you're recognized and seen for your ability. So I did always feel like early on, I think I spent a lot of time working and burning the midnight oil to make sure that everything was
Mm.
perfect. And later I kind of found the balance of building those relationships in addition to that, because I think early on in my career I was just so focused on doing that I did not kind of build some of those relationships early on.
So I'll still ask Anika some questions, but if you have questions for her or comments, we like to make this interactive. So if you can put those in the chat or in the Q&A, and actually I have something that just showed up. Oh, someone just said, "Did you get my email?" That was a personal one. That's hilarious. Um, so yeah, we like to make it interactive. So if you have questions or comments, and I can actually see the Facebook Live this time as well.
Okay.
So, you know, I actually want to bring up a different subject because I really believe this all ties together with the power of creative leadership. And leadership for us has always been about influence. When I look at that, it's really about how do we influence people. So we influence our relationships, our family, our community, our teams, our
Yep.
our businesses. And in this time and age, and starting off that your parents were active, I love it. And it actually makes so much sense because when there were some riots going on, you said, well, we're just hanging out in my mom and dad's house in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, so how do you believe that the power of creativity will help influence our world or could influence it?
Well, I mean, so one of the things that I've kind of started reading a lot since COVID, and it's kind of almost like I rediscovered again. It was Brene Brown. So uh, love her.
I love
And,
her.
and one of the things that she talked through was this whole idea of being, I think it's her latest book, Brave in the Wilderness, of this whole idea of us being sorted in alone, and this concept that uh, we have created these ideological bunkers that we all live in. And so we've kind of hunkered down into these bunkers, and then based on kind of what you believe, that's kind of who you connect with. And it's not necessarily based on anything other than we hate the same people. And what I feel like from a creative and artist can do is that you tap in beyond kind of that bias. And when you look at kind of, from a historical perspective, how artists portray uh events, and how uh artists kind of, whether it's through kind of protest music or what have you, that the connection that an artist can make is very, very different than I think the connection that you have when you have kind of all these ideological and political conversations. Like artists can tap into the soul of a situation. So if you can remember like seeing a picture or image that kind of depicts something that you can't necessarily bring to words, or that song or that poem that kind of hits you just so, that communicates all these things that you are feeling, that really, really kind of put things into a different perspective. So I feel like creativity and artists are kind of almost like the architects of some of our experiences, and can help kind of make sense out of chaos sometimes.
I love that. Well, it is. It's about a different perspective. So
Yeah.
creativity opens up the eyes, the vision to what is possible,
Yes.
things that we haven't seen, things that we haven't heard. But
Yeah.
you have to be going back, and you have to be willing to get uncomfortable,
You do.
and you have to be willing to look at something through a different lens. And I think so many times people get stuck in, this is the only way to do it. This is the only way that we're going to think.
Yeah. This is the
And
only yeah, you get into this concept of cancel culture, and it's like I've had a lot of we've had, I'm sure, as we all have all of these conversations, to say they've done this, and so I'm never going to speak to them again. But I'm like, I have friends of all walks of life, and so how do you figure out, how do you get past the anger, and how do you have that conversation, and how do you kind of say, I want to embrace everything, and I just need to kind of almost I think Renee kind of says, almost, I think it's hugging strangers, or it, and kind of saying that I'm willing to be vulnerable and have the tough conversation to get to a place of understanding.
so how do you bridge the divide?
Uh, Courageous conversations. I mean, I've had, so for me, it's not just having conversations with anyone, but to, people that I care about, that we are on different sides, being just having a very open, raw, hard conversation, and being vulnerable with, and taking that first step. And so it has to be with someone that you trust, to say that I like, here's how your views make me feel, and here's why, and here's my story, and let's kind of figure out where we can have common ground, and where the disconnect is. And and also, I want to understand, I need to understand the why, I need to understand kind of where your perspective is and where's ours differ. And sometimes you find that when people are not that far apart, in many cases. I think you have a fringe that is absolutely kind of on the wrong side of history. But I think when you talk to people generally, um, fear, once again, fear is is just kind of this motivator of so many horrible things. So when you're fearful, and when you're not knowledgeable, and when you are uh, in a place where you're not empowered, all these things kind of create this perfect storm of, you know, where we are today.
Yeah. But see, we go back into your whole topic, right?
Yeah.
The power of creative leadership. And you have to be willing, in order to ever get creative, we
Yeah.
have to be willing to think outside the box, which means
Yeah.
we have to get out of fear. And
Yes.
when you look at the influence, and it goes right back into it's the relationship, but figuring out how to build trust, how to bridge the gap, to say, wait a second, we all want the same thing, whether it's at work, whether it's in our relationships. at the core, people want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to have value, they want to know that they matter.
Yeah. And so, and I think part of it is, we talked about, and I think I talked about earlier, not being able to know how to deal with fear. But I mean, I think the biggest way is dealing with it head on. And I think I've been talking around that, but part of it is, the first step is facing your fears, facing them head on, and almost going down that path of like, well, what is the worst that could happen? What is the worst that could happen? But also, what is the best thing that could happen? Like, not necessarily looking at it from the standpoint of like, this is going to be a horrible thing, but being strong enough to look past some of that and to say, okay, I know and I embrace and I accept that this is what I'm fearful of, but I know that there's power in getting to the other side. And so how do I do that? And how do I have those conversations? And how do I, what do I need to do for myself to adjust that, to make that a reality? So for me, I mean, I think that's a big part of it. And really kind of visualizing where you want to be, and starting to kind of pull some of those things into action to say, this is where I am today, but here are things that I want to do, and here are those baby steps that I can take to make that happen.
Well, and that's what you had to do all along the way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So what's your next steps? What are your next steps?
I don't know. I mean, so, and it's a crazy place to be. I mean, I want, in these last couple of months, I've become more and more creative. So I want to write. I know that I want to write. I have been talking to my friends and even my nephew. And so, like, I, want to write a book. So I think that's definitely in my future. And that's something that I've been, once again, had this fear of doing. But, to the prime thing, what's the worst that can happen? I've seen and kind of read great books, and I've seen and read books that have said, make me feel like I could do this. So why not?
Right. Well, and I'm this is my belief so strong. We all have a message, every single one of us. And that's part of the
Yeah,
reason why we do the leadership now.
yeah,
We all have something that somebody needs. And if we're not speaking, if we're not sharing, we're robbing the people of opportunities to learn, to grow, because we have an answer.
yeah,
And when you look at the what's the worst thing, and it starts now, right?
absolutely.
So you want to?
I am going to write a book. So thank
Did you
you.
hear that,
Thank
everyone? She's going to write a book. Do you know what your topic is?
So I have it's crazy. I am a fantasy nut. So we've been uh, exploring just kind of creating kind of a fantasy series. So she'll see.
I love it. Your
We make it
creative
happen.
side comes in.
Yes.
So I have a question. Cindy asked, on the topic of fear, have you ever experienced the imposter syndrome? This is very common among high achievers, which you obviously are. If so, how have you dealt with the imposter syndrome?
I have experienced it. I think especially like whenever I step into a new opportunity, you kind of go through that feeling of, am I good enough? Do they know what they're doing? How do you address it? And for me, I think it's the same way I deal with fear. It's kind of walking myself um, through kind of that process of realizing that, one, I can do it. I can do it. I would not be here otherwise. And talking and essentially talking myself off a ledge. But imposter syndrome, that's something that is very, very much that I something that I have dealt with. And part of it is talking through it. One of the great things that I've been able to establish are kind of a network of friends and mentors and people that I can come to and have the conversation about. Um, this is what I'm feeling. And to help me kind of think through, like, here are the positive things, and kind of give me that positive reinforcement that I need, and helping me visualize what those next steps are and what the things that I need to do. But I mean, I think it's kind of one step at a time, and it gets a little bit less each time. But I think it comes from being your worst critic and always kind of going back and reliving things that you would do differently, or decisions that you would make, or comments that you should have said that you didn't say, or things that you wish you could take back, and all those types of things just kind of play and loop in your head. And part of it is silencing that, and having people that that are part of your circle that help you do that.
Well, and we rise and fall to the level of our support. So
Yeah.
the people we
Yeah.
surround ourselves with, we take on their beliefs, their attitude. And
Yeah.
when you surround yourself with people who are like, no, no, what are you doing? You
Yeah,
know?
exactly. To like, and I have a friend, and I think we're so in tune so much. And so a lot of times she's like, she'll just send me a note. She's like, stop it, whatever you're doing, and can feel that when I kind of go into kind of my, when I go too quiet, and to come in and check on me. And I really do feel like I can't say enough for kind of having essentially your kind of your own personal board of directors, and that group of people that are going to be there to support you. They're going to be your cheerleader, that will kind of tell you the truth no matter what, that will kind of be that motivator to help you achieve, to say, okay, this is who I want to be when I grow up, and have that great group of people. Because Mary, you're so right that um, I kind of saw a big difference when I changed kind of that core group of people that were in my ear, to people that I knew kind of were kind of supportive, and kind of that circle that I needed. So yeah,
And going along the lines with the imposter syndrome is when you don't have to prove it to anyone
yeah,
and you just own it.
yeah,
And sometimes people are so afraid to own it because they think, well, then it's going to be ego. No,
yeah,
we need to own our strengths. We need to own our gifts. We need to step in and stop asking permission.
yeah.
You can be humble and hungry and still own who you are.
And so, and I think, that's this is crazy. I was having this conversation with my sister, because I think that is the kind of the difference, and kind of the stigma that I think our parents did leave us with, that there was this thing of being humility and being humble and doing all these other things, but not necessarily tooting your own horn. And I'm learning that now more so than anything, that it's okay to kind of lean into your power, and it's okay to own that piece of you. And I think for a long time, that's something that I've kind of still felt like I needed to shrink myself a little bit, and I don't feel that way anymore.
Yeah. There's nothing enlightened about playing small, right?
Right. There is not.
Just own it. So what is your superpower? So speaking of owning it, what's Anika's superpower?
So it's so funny. Someone else asked me this, and I think, and I think at that time, and I still think it's true, I think it's the kind of empathy, the emotional intelligence piece of it. I do feel deeply, and I have this connection that I have with people, and I feel like that is something that I have not really ever leaned into, that I am starting to lean into more now, that I do. I can feel and take on, and that helps me to, I think, understand and work with people in a different, and actually a more intimate way, because I do have feel like I have that connection, and I can feel, and sometimes I feel too much, but it's something that I that now I own, that I don't think I did before.
But so you talk about that superpower and owning it and knowing that you're empathetic and knowing that you connect, it really ties back into the power of creative leadership because people want to follow people who are authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and I think that's kind of what I've seen, and it because you have so many people that aren't, that are, or that genuinely don't, and it's hard, that especially in kind of leadership roles, that are managers versus leaders, that don't necessarily kind of look for not just kind of what's the right thing for the company, but how do you make sure that you grow and develop that team, and what's the right thing for the individual as well. And so that's something that has always been, something that's important too, in terms of finding people to mentor, because I know how important it was for me when I didn't have someone that could be that for me, to make sure that I'm always that for someone else.
That's the Gandhi, right? Be the change that you want to see. We
Yes,
get to
pretty
be
much.
what we want.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think that's it. Part of it is taking your experiences, kind of the good and bad, and shaping that to help kind of create the environment that that people can flourish and thrive in.
Absolutely. So this is your final thoughts. And I always say this is like your soapbox. So what would you like to leave the viewers, the listeners with? Last words, thoughts, insights.
I would just say, you know, that you are your own kind of cheerleader, be your own cheerleader. Really, really take the time and kind of find out that thing that ignites your passion, and not just kind of ignites your passion, but also allows you to share that with others. Because I think the saying is that you kind of, when you do for yourself, you find happiness, but when you do for others, you find fulfillment. And I think, find the thing that fulfills you.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. Well, Anika, I just want to say thank you so much for being on here. Thank you for sharing your time. I've always, from the time I met you, I just admire you. I respect the heck out of you. And I just love to watch you just continuing to evolve and to own your superpowers. And I can't wait to see your next steps. I can't wait to read your book. I have
Thank
one more
you.
question. On
Okay.
mentoring, where do you go about finding mentors? Do you have sponsors, or how do you find sponsors?
And it's interesting. So the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, just very quickly. So mentors are, um, I think they can be anyone. I find mentors in my peer group. I, you can, like, if there's someone that you kind of see, that you feel inspired by, I think that's kind of part of a good place to start. Or if you have, but for me, I see mentors vertically and horizontally. And so I have a lot of people that I work with, that are peers or colleagues at works, or that are in organizations that I'm associated with, that that I've kind of reached out to for advice. I consider Ann Nichols Simmons a mentor. I came to her, for example, with a lot of questions that I had, and she kind of directed me to you and to Bold, as in addition to just kind of listening and being that resource. And sponsor it's interesting. So a sponsor is someone that will give you the opportunity. So that could be um, someone that sees you and kind of is going to put their reputation on the line to give you that next opportunity to say this. And I think all these things are developed through relationships. So part of it is kind of, so for me, it's been very organic, that I've kind of had these just genuine connections with people, and that has led me to some of these opportunities. But I think it also can be strategic in terms of knowing, one, what are the things that you're interested in doing, and finding people that are successful in those areas, that you also have a genuine connection with, that you can kind of work with and build that rapport with. So I think it really first starts on finding people that are in the area that you're interested in, and also that you have a natural connection with too, because I think a lot of it is about relationship. Um, and that relationship is first, and then I think through that some of these things come.
It's a fantastic question.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to finish launching the final poll. And once again, just thank you. Michael Goder is next Tuesday at 9 a.m. And can't wait for y'all to join us. And again, Anika, thank you so much. And
Thank
I
you.
can't wait to read your book. Seriously.
Now it's out there. I'm going to do it.
I know. Now that you made the commitment live.
Yes.
Well, have an amazing rest of your day. And thank you all for being on here. And we will see you next week.
All right, you too. Thank you for everything.
Absolutely. Bye for now.
Bye.